Hi, friends, and welcome back. All right, I've been talking a lot about women's health lately and hormones, but today this one is for my men. Now, if you're a woman watching, stay with me because what I'm about to walk through affects the men in your life directly, and you might recognize some of it. Today, I want to talk about testosterone. This is something I'm very passionate about. This conversation has been on my heart for a long time. It's very near and dear to me for the men that I love, the men in my friends' lives, and my 3 young boys. So, as I mentioned, I want to talk about testosterone. I want to talk about what it actually is and what it does in the body, and then what happens when it starts to decline, which is a natural part of aging. It's supposed to happen. I also want to talk about what's really driving the dysfunction underneath that can show up as these hormones start to decline. I want to have a real honest conversation about testosterone replacement therapy, not to bash it, but because I feel like there's a bigger picture that most men, especially in my life, aren't getting, and I want to talk about it. I also want to give you some natural things that you can do to improve your testosterone naturally starting today. So let's dive in. All right, first, what is testosterone actually? Well, I feel like most women and men think about it in like this manly concept, the gym, the bedroom, drive, and performance. But testosterone is a full body protective hormone that is working in every system you have every single day. Testosterone protects your heart. Low testosterone is now recognized as an independent risk factor for heart disease. Testosterone protects your bones the same way estrogen protects women's bones. It also protects your brain. The research is now connecting low testosterone to cognitive decline and higher risk for Alzheimer's. Testosterone controls your metabolism, your insulin sensitivity, your body composition. It also regulates your mood. Low testosterone is directly linked to depression, anxiety, and loss of drive. And now here's one that most people don't know. Testosterone governs your sleep. Most of your daily testosterone is released in pulses during deep sleep, and your peak testosterone time is between 8 and 10 a.m. in the morning. So bad sleep tanks your testosterone, and low testosterone wrecks your sleep. It's a loop that feeds itself. Now, testosterone is not a performance drug. It is a systemic protective hormone. And understanding that can change everything about how you respond to it when it starts to shift and decline in your body naturally. So I want to dive into that piece, the natural decline. As I mentioned, testosterone declines with age, and that is natural. In men, it starts anywhere in their 30s and 40s, and it should decline around 1 to 2% per year after that. That is supposed to happen. That is how God designed men. You are not supposed to have the same testosterone in your 50s that you had in your 20s. Now, what is not natural is the decline happening earlier than that, or declining faster than that 1 to 2% every year, or suffering through it. Because all of that is almost entirely determined by the terrain of the body of the man that the hormones are declining in. And when I say the terrain, I'm talking about the gut, the liver, the sleep, the toxic burden, the metabolic health of the man. A man with a clean system may barely notice this natural decline, but a man whose system is burdened gets hit so much harder. The decline does not create this dysfunction. It exposes it. It reveals what's been building up slowly over time, and that distinction matters enormously because the terrain can be addressed, the terrain can be reversed, and the terrain can be restored. So, before I dive in deeper into this, I'm going to put some numbers on the table. And this is not to scare anyone, but it needs to be acknowledged and said. Heart disease is the number 1 killer of men. It accounts for nearly a quarter of all male deaths. And the overwhelming majority of those cases are tied to lifestyle. Lifestyle means that these are preventable. And if they're preventable, they're also reversible. Now, more than a third of adult men are obese. Nearly a third have high blood pressure, and men have a higher death rate than women at every single age. Y'all, this is heartbreaking. We need our men. I want our men around. We need y'all. Now, most of that gap is not genetics. It's about the choices that have been made throughout your life. So here's the good news and what I need you to hear alongside these numbers. Cardiovascular disease is now proven to begin developing 20 to 30 years before a diagnosis is ever made. And symptoms can show up 10 years before lab markers even change, which means you have a very long window to intervene before this becomes a problem. This is not a cliff, it's a slope, and it is reversible. The earlier you catch it, the easier it is, but it is reversible at any time. So everything I'm going to talk about today exists in this window. You can change your health trajectory at any point in time. And it matters more than most men have ever been told. So I want to talk about some of the signs. Because low testosterone rarely announces itself loudly. Frankly, really no disease or diagnosis ever announces itself loudly. Symptoms are your body's language. It's the only way it knows how to communicate. It starts with a whisper, or often starts with a whisper, and then gradually gets louder to a scream when it goes undiagnosed. So initially, when low testosterone starts to decline, most men just feel off. Maybe low motivation, harder to build or keep muscle, a little more belly fat, mood that feels flatter than it used to, less drive, lower libido than they had in their 20s, sometimes even erectile dysfunction. There's that general sense of I just don't feel like myself anymore. I don't feel the same. But here's one sign that almost nobody talks about. Now go look at your lower legs between the ankle and your mid-calf. Men with declining testosterone often lose the hair in this area. The follicles stop getting what they need, and most men blame this on their socks just rubbing off the hair. But it's not the socks. That is your body signaling a hormonal shift. And here is why that small sign matters in a big way. Remember, cardiovascular disease starts showing symptoms 10 years before the labs begin to change. The body signals dysfunction long before conventional medicine can measure it. The leg hair, the low drive, the belly fat that doesn't budge, the energy that used to be there and is not there anymore. These are not just inconveniences, they are early language from the body. And if we know how to listen to that language of the body, we can act inside this window. We can reverse course much easier. So I want to talk about the real driver behind all of this. There is a piece that almost never makes the conversation when we're talking about testosterone, and it's the piece that I believe sits at the root of most of what men are experiencing. Now it starts with toxins. We live with an unprecedented toxic burden in this world. Environmental chemicals and toxins, pesticides, fungicides, heavy metals, mold, endocrine disruptors, radiation, the list goes on. These compounds accumulate in your tissues, organs, and glands, and they do something specific. They drive pathogenic overgrowth in the gut, frankly in the whole body eventually, and your gut is not just a digestion organ. It is directly involved in testosterone metabolism. Researchers are calling it the testrobolome. And here's how the testrobolome works. Once testosterone has done its job, it gets sent to the liver to be packaged up along with its byproducts. It is sent through bile into the small intestines, large intestines, toward the colon, and out in excretion and a bowel movement. But not all testosterone is supposed to leave the body. Some needs to be reabsorbed and recirculated. That is one way the body can manage and keep testosterone in circulation even in a declining body. Your gut microbiome is the regulator of that balance. So a healthy gut manages it appropriately. A dysbiotic gut, a degraded gut, a dysfunctional gut, a leaky gut that is driven by toxic burden and pathogenic overgrowth, it throws this whole system off. There is even one strain of bacteria, Pseudomonas nitroreducens, I think is how you say it, but it contains an enzyme that literally degrades testosterone rather than recycling it. This is found in significantly higher levels in men with both low testosterone and high cholesterol. So your gut is either supporting your hormonal balance or it is actively working against it and destroying it. Now, when the gut lining breaks down, leaky gut, things that were never meant to enter the bloodstream do. And so when I'm saying leaky gut, along the lining of our gut, our intestinal tract, we have these tight little junctions. And after we've broken down our food, the waste products, the toxins, etc., should pass on by, and only the tiny little micronutrients that we need should pass through these tight little junctions, get into the bloodstream, and circulate throughout our body. But with time, with toxic exposure and bad food, stress, etc., these tight junctions start to loosen and gap. This is called leaky gut. And then the things that should have been passing by now are able to seep through these gaps, these loose junctions, get into the bloodstream and start circulating in the body. They never should have been there. So that could be food particles that were never fully broken down. It could be environmental toxins. And most significantly for this conversation is LPS, lipopolysaccharide, which is a toxin from the outer wall of certain gut bacteria. LPS is normal, but it should stay within the gut. It should not seep through these gaps. When LPS seeps through these gaps and enters circulation, the immune system fires an inflammatory response. When any of these things get into the blood system and circulation that don't belong, it sees it as a foreign invader and it sends a full-on attack. Inflammation fires, and that inflammation does something specific. Well, it does a lot of things, but here for this conversation, it poisons the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of our cells. It's the energy source. It is how our cells work. Without properly functioning mitochondria, the cell can't do its job, whatever cell that may be. So why does this matter for testosterone? It matters because making testosterone is one of the most energy-intensive processes in the body. The Leydig cells in the testes that produce testosterone are packed with mitochondria. There's so many of them. Those are the engines. So when the mitochondria are compromised, when they're dysfunctional by chronic inflammation and toxic exposure, then the hormone production drops. Not because something is fundamentally broken, but because the mitochondria didn't have the ability to produce the energy for the cell to do its job and produce the actual hormone. It's because the terrain is not one where optimal production is possible. And here's the cycle I see constantly, consistently. Toxic burden drives gut dysfunction. Gut dysfunction drives inflammation. Inflammation drives mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial compromise. Then hormone production drops. This happens in men and women. Low testosterone then promotes fat accumulation. More fat means more aromatization, which means the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. More estrogen drives more inflammation. The cycle feeds itself. You cannot supplement your way out of a toxic terrain. You cannot out-hormone your way out of a toxic terrain, and you cannot peptide your way out of a toxic terrain. The toxins and the pathogens, and I'm talking about the bacteria, viruses, parasites, they have to be addressed first. Drainage pathways have to be open. The gut has to be healed and sealed. Those junctions need to be tight again. The mitochondria have to be restored and working properly. Then, in that clean environment, the body has the conditions to produce what it was designed to produce at whatever age you are. That is the drainage and detox work. That is the foundation of everything I do. And it applies to men's hormonal health as much as it applies to women's. I go deeper into this into 2 episodes I've done, the gut hormone connection and the full hormone life cycle. I'll put links for both below if you want to do a deeper dive. So now I want to have a real honest conversation about testosterone replacement therapy. I am not anti-testosterone replacement therapy or TRT per se, because there are men for whom it is clinically appropriate and genuinely helpful. Now, what I am passionate about is informed consent. Most men in my life and in the women around me, their spouses or family's life don't seem to be getting the full picture before they make that decision about getting on TRT that can affect their own body's production, potentially for the rest of their lives. And it affects those that are closest to them, which is why I think the women in their lives are talking about it. And me being a woman, I've experienced this and have had this conversation on more encounters than I would like. So I want to share this. I'm going to start with the feedback loop, because this is the most important thing to understand about exogenous testosterone. And that means testosterone that's coming from outside of the body, not produced from the inside. It affects the feedback loop. Your hypothalamus is the master regulator at the very top of your entire hormonal chain. It is constantly monitoring all of your hormones, including testosterone, and it sends signals downward based on what it detects. So when the hypothalamus detects that testosterone is being supplied from the outside, it sends signals to reduce production on the inside because there's already enough, and sometimes too much. So that signal goes to the pituitary gland, which relays it to the testes and other glands. Then they all follow suit. Over time, the testes stop producing testosterone on their own. Again, they're getting it from an outside source. In some cases, the testes physically reduce in size because of this. This is not a side effect. This is the mechanism. The same thing happens with thyroid medication. I know because it happened to me. But the great news is it is reversible, as it was for me and many of my clients. And you cannot adjust one hormone without affecting all of the others. When you bring testosterone in from the outside, it creates a cascade. And that cascade does not stop at the hormones. So I want to walk you through step by step this cascade that I'm talking about. And I want to be clear about it because I have watched every single step of this happen in real time in someone that I loved in a predictable manner I saw coming. And I don't want to see it happen in other men, especially my boys when they get older. So step one, the testes go quiet and so does the thyroid. This is what I just talked about in that feedback loop. The signal that tells the testes to make testosterone is also the same signal that drives sperm production. So when testosterone drops, when that signal drops, guess what drops? Sperm production drops too. This is why men on TRT often struggle with fertility. And most men, I have found, are not necessarily told this before they start, especially the younger men who assume they just have time to deal with babies later when it's not on their forefront. Later sometimes is more complicated than they expected. And at the same time, because the hypothalamus manages the thyroid alongside the gonads, the thyroid begins to quiet too. Numbers shift. Thyroid medication gets prescribed. Nobody connects it to when the testosterone started. This is not a coincidence. This is the cascade. This is the biology. This is physiology. This is how the body works. So step two, insulin resistance builds. A slowing thyroid drops metabolism. Disrupted sleep rises cortisol. Cortisol rises blood sugar. Visceral fat begins to accumulate. Then insulin resistance builds. Blood sugar climbs. And guess where you are now? Pre-diabetes. I saw this in the blood work and I said, you are on your way to a heart attack. I was reading the map. So step three, testosterone converts to estrogen and the blood thickens. Now, testosterone converts to estrogen through a process called aromatization. This happens in fat tissue. The more visceral fat, the more conversion occurs. The more liver burden, the less clearance. And before you think this does not apply to you because you look lean and you're muscular and you're fit, visceral fat is not always visible. A man can look athletic and still carry significant fat around his organs. It shows up in inflammatory markers, insulin resistance, and not the mirror. Excess estrogen in men promotes blood clotting. It drives water retention and affects emotional regulation in documented and measurable ways. And this is almost never part of the pre-treatment conversation, at least from what I have found talking to men in my life. Now, at the same time, testosterone drives red blood cell production. In the right amount, this is useful. This is great. And honestly, this is one of the reasons why men feel so good initially when they're put on TRT. More red blood cells means more oxygen delivery, more energy, more vitality. But at the doses that are common with pellets and injections, that same mechanism can push red blood cell density dangerously high. It's a condition called polycythemia. The blood thickens. It doesn't move as easily. It creates pressure. It clots more readily. The heart has to work harder. Now, a good practitioner is going to monitor this specifically, but not all do that. So step 4, the path to a heart attack becomes visible. Thick blood prone to clotting, plus inflamed insulin-resistant tissue, a liver too burdened to process cholesterol properly, artery walls under sustained stress, and now the cholesterol piece, because most people have never been told the truth about this. I'm going to dive into cholesterol for a bit. Cholesterol is not the villain. Cholesterol is the Band-Aid. When arteries become inflamed, whether it's from excess estrogen, from LPS recirculating or circulating in the bloodstream, from elevated blood sugar damaging the vessel lining, from chronic inflammation, whatever it is, the body sends cholesterol to patch the damaged walls. It's trying to protect you. It lays it down like spackle over a crack in a wall. But when the inflammation keeps coming, the patching keeps happening and plaque builds. Arteries narrow. Blood that is already thick now has less room to move. The heart works harder and harder. It's not cholesterol's fault. Just like it's not the Band-Aid's fault when someone bleeds out. It's the cut's fault. Here is the inflammation, the chronic systemic inflammation. And eventually something gives. That is not bad luck. That is not genetics. That is a pathway, a physiological pathway, a completely traceable sequence of events starting with a hormone intervention that was never paired with the question of why the testosterone was low in the first place or why the symptoms were so severe in the first place. I watched this entire path unfold in real time with someone that I cared deeply about. The thyroid medication appeared on schedule. The blood sugar moved exactly as I expected, diagnosed with prediabetes. I said out loud, this is headed towards a heart attack. Unfortunately, that person spent a week in the hospital years later with a cardiac event. I didn't want to be right, but I was. I saw the writing on the wall, and I do not want this for other men, especially not my boys. So here's a little reframe. Before I move on, here is I want you to hear. Testosterone was always going to decline. That is natural, and that is supposed to happen. The problem was never the declining testosterone. The problem was the terrain that made the symptoms severe enough, or the decline happen early enough, or the decline happened faster, that sent someone looking for a prescription, that sent them looking for the testosterone replacement therapy. A toxic burden, a struggling gut, a burdened liver, mitochondria that could not keep up. If that terrain had been addressed first, then the testosterone replacement therapy conversation may have never needed to happen, or it could have looked different. Because if that conversation had happened, the body would have been in a position to handle all of this without the cascade, or could handle the testosterone replacement therapy without this cascade. So I want to dive into the emotional and relational piece. There's one piece that almost never gets included in the TRT conversation, and it's what I hear about most from the partners, from the spouses, the family members of the men who are on the testosterone replacement therapy. I'm talking about the personality changes. And I'm not going to say this is for everyone, but I've seen it and heard about it way too much to be quiet. I have to share. When testosterone converts to excess DHT, the more potent androgenic form, and when estrogen accumulates without being properly cleared through the liver, like we talked about, what happens mentally and emotionally is real and measurable. There gets to be a point where there's reduced impulse control, a heightened reactivity, paranoia, more rigidity, quicker to anger, sometimes more volatile and even violent. Here is a story I unfortunately hear on repeat, and I experienced it myself with someone I loved. And I want to be clear, this is a pattern, not one person. A man starts TRT usually because he wants more energy and drive back. Those are real and valid reasons. But his partner usually notices these changes before he does. The relationship strains under something neither of them have a name for. This is not a character flaw. This is biochemistry, and it deserves to be part of the conversation before the decision to get on TRT is ever made. Now, if you're a man on testosterone replacement therapy and something in this resonates, I want you to hear this without judgment, because I'm not judging you. We're all doing the best we can with what we have. I'm here to give more information. And you may not have been given the full picture. That wasn't your fault. But I'm hoping that this information helps because information means more choices. If you're a partner or a family member watching this, your experience is real and you are not alone in it. So, how far down the cascade? I want to talk about that because this cascade is unfortunately not a rare worst case scenario. Each step I just described is documented in the research independently. Polycythemia, the thickening of the red blood cells, affects a significant percentage of men on injectable and pellet testosterone. Aromatization, the testosterone converting to estrogen, happens in virtually everyone carrying visceral fat. Remember, you don't have to look fat to have visceral fat around your organs. You can be lean and athletic and still have it. That hypothalamus, that feedback loop that suppresses the natural hormone production, that happens in essentially everyone on exogenous testosterone. That's just physiology, how that feedback loop works. So whether all of these converge into a cardiac event, well, that depends on the terrain of the man who's taking the testosterone replacement therapy. It depends on the dose. It depends on how carefully it is being monitored by his practitioner, and whether anyone has asked the most important question before even writing the prescription. Not just asking, is your testosterone low, but asking, is it lower than it should be for where you are in life? Is it declining faster than that 1 or 2% per year? And if so, what is driving that? Why are the symptoms so severe? Those questions always have an answer. And honestly, that answer is almost never, you simply need more testosterone. Not saying it can't be, but very rarely. Now, before I get to what you actually can do, there's one more signal that I want to address because the body sends messages in whispers before it gets loud, and it sends it way before it shows up on a lab. So erectile dysfunction, I want to dive into that for a brief moment before I close this out. Erectile dysfunction is not a testosterone problem. It is a cardiovascular signal. An erection is a blood flow event. The vessels involved are among the smallest arteries in the entire body, only 1 to 2 millimeters across. The vessels that supply blood to your heart are 3 to 4 millimeters across, so they're much bigger. Vascular damage always shows up first in the smallest vessels, years before it reaches the larger ones. So if blood is not flowing properly to the penis, it is not flowing properly anywhere else. The heart just has not shown its hand yet. And in many cases, erectile dysfunction is not the problem. It's the preview of what's to come. Men with erectile dysfunction have a 2 to 3 times higher risk of a cardiovascular event in the following 5 to 10 years. Your body is not failing you. It is communicating with you in the only way it knows how, through symptoms. Symptoms are the only voice your body has. And if you know how to listen, then you can do something about it. So here's the great news. There's information. As I mentioned, this is all reversible. And here's what genuinely moves the needle. I want to give you 7 real things with real evidence behind them. Now that you understand the terrain, you'll understand why each of these matter. So 1, sleep. This is the most important one, and it's a great place to start. It's free. In a study, 1 week of 5-hour nights dropped testosterone in healthy young men by 10 to 15%. It's published. That is 10 to 15 years of aging in just 7 days. Y'all, that's a lot. Most of your daily testosterone is released during deep sleep, as I mentioned earlier. You need 7 to 9 hours. Consistent timing, a dark, cool room, no alcohol or reduced alcohol within 3 hours of going to bed is ideal. And if you snore, please go get checked for sleep apnea. If you're breathing through your mouth, all of these things cause oxygen deprivation in the body. Definitely affects your heart, but for the purpose of this conversation, that oxygen deprivation directly affects the Leydig cells that produce the testosterone. If they don't have the oxygen, they can't produce it. It's one of the most overlooked drivers of low testosterone in men, as well as heart disease, as I mentioned. Okay, so number 2, lift heavy things. Resistance training is the only form of exercise with a clear, consistent, positive effect on testosterone. Compound movements like squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, 3 to 4 times a week has been proven at a challenging weight to improve testosterone. However, recover well. Excessive high volume endurance training can actually have the opposite effect and suppress free testosterone because of sustained cortisol elevation. Cortisol is our stress hormone. So move hard, but also rest hard and give yourself something to train for. Men are wired to work towards a goal. So put a goal out there. Have fun with it. All right, number 3, optimize vitamin D. Vitamin D, funnily enough, is not actually a vitamin. It's a hormone. And vitamin D receptors live directly in those Leydig cells that produce testosterone in the testes. Men with low vitamin D who supplemented for 12 months saw testosterone rise by around 25% in clinical trial. That's big. Now, the best source of vitamin D is directly from the sun on bare skin, not through glass and not through sunglasses. Your eyes are also a great way to absorb it. Just don't look directly at the sun. You cannot get vitamin D through a window. You just get warm. It needs to be direct. Now, you can also get it through food sources, including fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, egg yolks, especially if they're from pasture-raised eggs, beef liver and cod liver oil. And now if you're going to supplement with vitamin D, take D3, not D2, and take it alongside K2 and magnesium. Both are required to properly activate D3 and use it within the body. Okay, number 4, check your zinc. Zinc deficiency alone dropped testosterone in healthy men by 73% in 20 weeks. 73! That's huge. Now, on the good news in the same study, by replenishing zinc, it doubled their testosterone in 6 months. So before anyone goes on testosterone replacement therapy, check your zinc levels. And by the way, oysters are a great food source. And here's something important to know. If your gut is leaky, remember those junctions are loose and you're not absorbing properly, even the best supplements and the best food are not going to get fully absorbed. The gut has to be working properly to get the nutrients and the cofactors we need to get all of this working. So number 5, eat real food, including fat. Cholesterol, I'm going to talk about it again, is the raw material for every single steroid hormone in the body, including testosterone. Yes, testosterone is a steroid hormone. The process starts in the mitochondria of the Leydig cells, where cholesterol gets converted into the precursor that eventually becomes testosterone. If there is no cholesterol available, no starting materials, then testosterone can't be formed. Is that direct? Cholesterol also builds bile, and bile is how the liver moves used testosterone out of the body for excretion or recirculation through the gut. So healthy cholesterol levels support both making testosterone and clearing it out properly once it's done its job. This is why men on very low-fat diets or aggressively managed on statins sometimes find that their testosterone is tanking. Their body is trying to make hormones and it doesn't have the raw materials it needs to make them. It doesn't have the cholesterol to make the testosterone. So prioritize healthy fats: olive oil, avocado, whole eggs, fatty fish, grass-fed meat, grass-finished meats, pasture-raised, nuts, and seeds. These are not indulgences. They are the infrastructure your body needs to make these hormones. Also, cut the refined carbs. It is proven to suppress testosterone production directly and reduce seed oils and ultra-processed food, which drive the inflammation and visceral fat accumulation that converts testosterone to estrogen. All right, so number 6, I want to give you some targeted herbs and nutrients. Here are 3 adaptogens with full human clinical trial data that support testosterone. Ashwagandha, I love this adaptogen. It lowers cortisol, remember that stress hormone, which competes directly with testosterone for the same building blocks in the body. I love that one. It's great for stress, amongst other things, obviously testosterone. Okay, the next one, Tongkat Ali, also known as Long Jack. It stimulates the hypothalamus and the pituitary to send stronger production signals to the testes. It also lowers SHBG, which stands for sex hormone binding globulin, which is a protein that binds testosterone and keeps it sitting inactive in the blood. When SHB goes down, more of your testosterone becomes free and actually usable in the body. So taking the Tongkat Ali or long jack is actually going to free up some of this testosterone, unbind it from the SHBG so that it can actually be used and active in the body. I hope that makes sense. And shilajit, which I think I always pronounce that wrong, but it's a purified mountain resin. It supports mitochondrial function inside the Leydig cells, really inside of all mitochondria, but we're talking about the Leydig cells and testosterone here. A 90-day trial in men 45 to 55 showed over 20% rise in total testosterone from this alone. Always used a purified, third-party tested product. Okay, and a few other herbs that are worth adding. First, horny goatweed. And this always makes me giggle when I'm talking about men's health. Sorry, you guys. Y'all are horny. But horny goatweed helps stimulate both testosterone and the thyroid. So if you tend to run cold or feel sluggish alongside your low thyroid symptoms, this combination is worth exploring. Next is DIM, D-I-M. It comes from cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. It naturally slows that conversion of testosterone into estrogen. Okay, and the next, wild oat. This helps release bound and active testosterone so that it can actually be used and freed, like we talked about earlier with the SHBG. It frees it so it can be used. And then last, boron. It's a trace mineral that directly supports testosterone conversion. Consistently overlooked and easy to add. All of these are. But again, you have to have a gut that is working properly that can actually absorb these nutrients and utilize them, whether they're coming from food or supplements. Okay, and number 7. This is like my jam. Address the terrain. This is the most important one, in my opinion, and in everything that I do with everyone I work with. But anyway, everything that I've mentioned before, all those 6 other things, including testosterone replacement therapy, works better in a clean system. So before the adaptogens, before the zinc, before any of it, address the toxic burden. It has to be addressed. The drainage pathways have to be open. The gut has to be healed and sealed. Those junctions need to be tight. The mitochondria have to be restored. The microbiome has to be working properly and in balance. You can take every supplement on the list. You can eat perfectly, sleep optimally, and exercise correctly, yet still not move the needle if the terrain is still underneath a toxic burden. The mitochondria that produce your hormones cannot function in a poisoned environment. Clean the environment first, then everything else works better. Works as if it was designed to. Start with sleep and movement. Optimize your vitamin D and zinc. Get fresh air, clean water, ideally filtered or distilled. I prefer distilled. Clean your food, clean up your diet. And if you want to go deeper, look at what is actually driving the dysfunction underneath. The toxins, the gut, the drainage, the pathogens, the mitochondria, the parasites. It all feeds on each other. It's a cycle. And it can end and it can be reversed. This is where the real shift happens. Not just in testosterone production, but in your full health. Now, if you're already on testosterone replacement therapy, I want to speak directly to you because you have 2 very valid paths after listening to this video, and both start in the same place. So some men want to come off of this. For those men, there is a path. It requires, as I mentioned, opening the drainage pathways, clearing the toxic burden and the pathogens that feed on it, healing and sealing the gut, restoring the mitochondria, doing the nervous system work. It is not guaranteed for everyone, but it is real for some. The body wants to regulate itself. It was built to do that. It's always trying to heal. It just needs the right conditions to do that. Now, the other men who are on TRT and want to stay on that, it might be a completely valid choice. Maybe it's working for you. Maybe it is medically necessary. Maybe it's the right decision for where you are in life. And that is okay. It's absolutely okay. But the terrain work still matters enormously. A clean gut means less aromatization, less testosterone converting to estrogen. Open drainage means the liver can clear the excess. Lower toxic burden means the mitochondria are not compromised. Better sleep and optimized nutrients mean your body responds to the testosterone you're giving it more efficiently, and those cascade effects that I talked about are reduced. You don't have to end up at a heart attack. You can be on testosterone replacement therapy and be significantly healthier about it. The terrain work does not require you to come off of TRT. It just makes everything else work better. So whether you want off or you want to optimize where you are, the path starts the same way. Clean the terrain, support the foundations of your health, give your body the conditions that it needs. Now, I will be very honest, I do not work specifically with men on hormone protocols. I primarily work with women, but this is very passionate to me from what I've experienced in my own life and the men that I love. And I do have some male clients too. With that being said, the foundational work that I do is the same for everybody, whether you're male or female. The gut, the drainage, the detox, the mitochondria, the nervous system. These are not women's issues. They are human issues. And addressing these changes the hormonal picture for everyone, male or female. Take the information and do what you want with it, because information is power. When you have information, it gives you choices. So with that said, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. There are a lot of men making important decisions right now, and I feel like they're making them without the full picture. Additionally, there's a lot of women who need this for the men in their lives and the men that they love. So I want to say thank you so much for being here. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. Again, share it with anyone that might be interested, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you, and I love you. Have a blessed day.